Every Monday morning, at exactly 8 p.m., an old red bicycle rolled slowly down Maple Street. The man riding it wore a faded blue postal jacket. His leather mailbag looked older than some of the houses on the street. His name was Thomas Reed. He was 71 years old, officially retired. Yet, every Monday, he still delivered one letter, not to a family, not to a business, but to an abandoned white house at the end of the street. The windows were covered with dust. The garden had turned wild. The porch swing moved only when the wind remembered it. No one had lived there for 18 years. Still, Thomas stopped his bicycle, walked to the mailbox, slipped one handwritten envelope inside, touched the mailbox gently, and whispered, "See you next Monday." Then he rode away. People noticed. Children laughed. Teenagers recorded videos of him from across the street. Some neighbors shook their heads. Poor old man. He probably can't accept that the family is gone. But one person wasn't laughing. A 26-year-old journalist named Olivia Parker had recently moved into the neighborhood. She watched Thomas repeat the same routine for 3 Mondays. Finally, she crossed the street. "Excuse me, sir." Thomas smiled politely. "Good morning." Olivia pointed toward the empty house. "Why do you keep delivering letters there?" Thomas looked at the house for several seconds, then answered softly, "Because someone is still waiting." Olivia frowned. "But no one lives there." Thomas smiled. "Not everyone who waits is standing at the front door." Before Olivia could ask another question, Thomas climbed onto his bicycle. "I'll tell you the story one day, but not today." That evening, Olivia searched old newspaper archives. The address appeared dozens of times. Then, one headline caught her attention. "Local family vanishes after devastating house fire. Daughter never found." Her heart skipped a beat. She opened the article. 18 years earlier, a fire had destroyed part of the house. The parents died. But their 8-year-old daughter, Emily Brooks, was never found. Police searched for weeks. There was no trace. The case eventually went cold. Olivia looked out her apartment window toward the silent house. Could Thomas have known the family? Or was he writing letters to a little girl who had disappeared 18 years ago? The next Monday, she decided she would follow him. She had no idea that hidden inside Thomas's worn leather mailbag was a bundle of unopened letters, and one secret that would change the entire town forever. The following Monday, Olivia parked her car 2 streets away. She wanted to know where Thomas went after delivering the mysterious letter. At exactly 8:00 a.m., the old mailman arrived on his red bicycle. He smiled at the abandoned house, placed another handwritten envelope inside the mailbox. As always, he gently touched the rusted mailbox. "Good morning, Emily." Then he quietly rode away. Olivia followed him from a distance. Instead of returning home, Thomas rode toward the edge of town. There, hidden beneath a hill of tall oak trees, was a small cemetery. He parked his bicycle beside an old stone bench, walked to a grave covered with fresh white daisies. The headstone read, "Sarah Brooks' beloved mother." Thomas removed his cap. "I delivered another one today. I promised I wouldn't miss a Monday." Olivia watched from behind a nearby tree. Her heart tightened. Who was Sarah? And who was Emily? After several minutes, Thomas reached into his worn leather mailbag. Inside were dozens of old envelopes. Each one had the same name written neatly on the front, Emily Brooks. Every letter had a different date. Some were nearly 20 years old. None had ever been opened. Olivia couldn't stay silent any longer. She stepped forward. "Mr. Reed." Thomas turned around. For a moment, he looked surprised. Then he smiled. "I wondered how long it would take before you followed me." Olivia looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I just needed to understand." Thomas nodded. "You deserve the truth." They sat together on the old bench. Thomas looked toward Sarah's grave. "Sarah was my younger sister." Olivia's eyes widened. "And Emily, my niece." Thomas smiled sadly. "The happiest little girl you'd ever meet. She loved drawing birds. She believed every letter carried a little piece of hope." He laughed quietly. "She even wanted to become a mail carrier one day." Thomas looked at the abandoned envelopes. "The night of the fire, I was working the late postal route. By the time I arrived, the house was already burning. The firefighters found Sarah and her husband. But Emily, they never found her, Olivia whispered. So everyone believed she died. Thomas slowly shook his head. No, I never believed it. Not for one single day. Olivia frowned. But the police searched everywhere. Thomas reached into his pocket. He unfolded a small piece of paper that had become soft with age. It was a child's drawing. A little red bicycle, the blue mailbox, and a smiling girl holding an envelope. On the back, Emily had written in crooked handwriting, "If I ever get lost, write to me every Monday. I'll always find my way home." Thomas smiled through tears. She was only 8. She thought letters could always find people. So, I kept my promise. For 18 years. I've written to her every Monday. Olivia couldn't stop crying. You never gave up. Thomas looked toward the empty road. Hope only dies when someone stops believing. Suddenly, Olivia noticed something unusual. The mailbox flag was raised. Thomas froze. His face turned pale. That's impossible. I always leave it down. Slowly, he walked toward the abandoned house. His hands trembled. Inside the mailbox wasn't just the letter he had delivered. There was another envelope. Old, yellow with age, covered in dust. Across the front, in faded handwriting, were 5 words that made Thomas's knees weaken. To Uncle Thomas, from Emily. His hands shook so badly he could barely pick it up. Olivia stared at the envelope in disbelief. How could this be? Thomas looked at the unopened letter, his eyes filled with tears. Because the handwriting was unmistakably Emily's, and the postmark on the back revealed something even more shocking. The letter had been mailed just 3 days earlier. Thomas stood frozen beside the old mailbox. His hands trembled as he stared at the envelope. To Uncle Thomas, from Emily, Olivia whispered, "Open it." For a moment, Thomas couldn't move. For 18 years, he had written letters to a little girl everyone believed was gone. Now, for the first time, there was a letter waiting for him. He slowly broke the seal. Inside was a single handwritten page. The paper smelled faintly of lavender. Thomas recognized the handwriting immediately. It was older, but unmistakably Emily's. He began to read. "Dear Uncle Thomas, if this letter has reached you, then you never stop coming. I prayed that would be true. For many years, I didn't know who I was. The night of the fire, a truck driver found me unconscious nearly 50 miles away. I had wandered into the woods trying to escape the flames. I remembered only my first name, nothing else. The hospital couldn't identify me. Kind couple adopted me and raised me as their own daughter. They loved me with all their hearts. But every Monday, I felt something missing. I never knew why. Until 3 weeks ago, after my adoptive father passed away, he gave me a small wooden box. Inside it were newspaper clippings about the fire and one drawing of a red bicycle. Suddenly, everything came back. I remembered you. I remembered Mom. I remembered our promise. I'm coming home next Friday. If you still believe in me, please meet me at the library. Love always, Emily. Thomas could no longer hold back his tears. The letter slipped from his hands. Olivia picked it up gently. Neither of them spoke. Sometimes, silence carries more emotion than words ever could. The entire town heard the news within hours. People who had once called Thomas the old man who delivered letters to an empty house now understood the truth. He had never been crazy. He had simply refused to let hope die. By Friday morning, the story had spread across the state. Television crews gathered outside the Maplewood Public Library. Neighbors lined the sidewalks. Children held white flowers. The old mailbox had become a symbol of unwavering love. At exactly 4:30 p.m., Thomas arrived on his faded red bicycle. He wore the same blue postal jacket, the same cap, and carried the same worn leather mailbag. Inside were the final 18 years of unopened letters. Mrs. Eleanor Brooks stood beside him. She smiled through tears. "You kept your promise." Thomas nodded quietly. "I just hope she kept hers." Minutes passed. Then, a silver car slowly pulled into the parking lot. The driver's door opened. A woman, in her early 30s, stepped out. She held a small wooden box against her chest. She looked around nervously. Then her eyes met Thomas's. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Finally, she whispered the words Thomas had waited 18 years to hear. "Uncle Tommy." Thomas dropped his mailbag. Letters scattered across the ground. He ran toward her. Faster than anyone thought a 71-year-old man could run, Emily burst into tears. She threw her arms around him. "I thought I'd never find you." Thomas held her tightly. "You already did." The crowd around them quietly wiped away tears. Even the reporters lowered their cameras. Some moments deserve to be remembered, not interrupted. Emily opened the wooden box she had carried. Inside was every birthday card Thomas had mailed before the fire. Her adoptive parents had kept them safe. "I read every one after I learned the truth. They helped me remember who I was." Thomas smiled. "I never stopped writing." Emily looked toward the old mailbox. "Can I see them?" Thomas carefully opened his leather mailbag. Inside were hundreds of handwritten letters, one for every Monday. Emily picked up the very first one. The date read, 18 years ago. She opened it carefully. The first sentence made her cry. "Dear Emily, wherever you are today, remember that someone is waiting for you with hope." She looked at Thomas. "You never gave up on me." Thomas smiled gently. Love isn't measured by how long someone is missing. It's measured by how long someone keeps believing. A month later, the abandoned house was no longer abandoned. Emily decided not to sell it. Instead, she restored it. Fresh white paint covered the walls. Flowers bloomed again in the front garden. Children laughed on the porch where silence had lived for years. One room became something special. A free community reading room for children. Above the entrance hung a wooden sign, "The Monday Letters Library." Below it, a smaller plaque read, "Dedicated to Thomas Reed, who taught us that hope is delivered one letter at a time." Every Monday morning, Thomas still rode his old red bicycle. But now, he no longer delivered letters to an empty house. Instead, he delivered storybooks to children who visited the library. Emily often rode beside him. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they remembered Sarah. And every Monday before leaving, Thomas gently touched the old mailbox one last time. Not because he was still waiting, but because it reminded him of the greatest lesson of his life. Sometimes, the smallest act repeated with love can travel farther than any letter. And sometimes, the person you've been waiting for is already finding their way home.